Dive Podcast, straight talk on politics, national security, and America's future. With Robert Johnson and Linda Miller, we cut through the spin, tackle the tough issues, and give you the real story behind today's headlines. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell to stay informed. Okay, let's unpack this. There's been an absolute whirlwind of diplomatic activity recently.
Yeah, a real flurry.
All centered around the ongoing conflict in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And we're talking specifically about U.S. President Trump and Russian President Putin.
Right, and the sudden acceleration, really, of efforts to, well, bring them to the table.
Exactly. So we're diving deep into these latest developments, the proposals flying around, and how the world is actually reacting to this pretty dizzying pace.
What's truly fascinating here is just how rapidly things seem to have escalated. Our mission today, let's say, is to cut through the noise and sort of distill the core movements. You've got U.S. President Trump's surprising, almost immediate summit offers. Then there are the specific proposals being discussed, what's actually on the table.
Okay.
And of course, the wide spectrum of global responses, everything from cautious optimism to, frankly, outright skepticism.
Which raises a huge question, doesn't it? What do these rapid shifts truly signify for the conflict's future? What are the real implications here?
Precisely.
So here's where it gets really interesting. And the speed. It's astonishing. U.S. President Trump has announced he's ready to hold a summit with Russian President Putin.
And suggesting it could happen incredibly fast.
Like next week fast. Or within 2 weeks. That's what's being said.
Yeah, and apparently his administration is already moving at top speed to plan this meeting.
Pushing ahead despite the usual, often lengthy time needed for these high-level diplomatic events.
It's quite a departure. This seems to come directly from U.S. President Trump's stated goal to make significant progress and quickly.
He believes a direct meeting is the way.
Seems so. He's made it clear he thinks a personal meeting is the most effective way to cut through the current impasse. It's not just talk. Aides have reportedly been told to act without delay.
Wow. That signals a strong personal investment in making this happen right now.
Definitely.
And what about location? Any word on that?
Well, it's still open, apparently, but the Middle East has emerged as a strong possibility.
Ah, right. There was talk back in May, wasn't there? Turkey's President Erdogan offered to host.
Exactly. During U.S. President Trump's visit to Gulf countries. If this goes through, it would be the first face-to-face between U.S. President Trump and Russian President Putin since, Finland in 2018?
Right. Quite a while.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this eagerness for a quick summit also comes amid U.S. President Trump's increasing stated, disappointment with the Russian President Putin.
Disappointment? How so?
He's apparently expressed frustration quite a bit, told journalists just last week that, pleasant and respectful conversations are often followed by new strikes on Ukraine.
Ah, okay. So that's sentiment. You think that led to the ultimatum change?
It certainly seems to have directly led to him shortening an earlier ultimatum. It was 50 days, now down to just 10.
10 days. That significantly ramps up the pressure, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It signals an unprecedented urgency on U.S. President Trump's part. It wasn't just a request. It felt like a demand for a significant de-escalation from Russia within a much tighter time frame.
With an implicit threat if ignored.
That's the implication, yeah. Further punitive measures, perhaps. It really underscores his frustration and this desire for a visible, immediate breakthrough.
So some are suggesting he's looking for a gift, a concession.
Exactly. Some analysts suggest U.S. President Trump is seeking something tangible, a concession from Russia to show progress. And this proposed air truce could potentially serve that purpose.
An air truce. We'll come back to that. But first, this gift idea, it lets him return with something concrete, a step towards de-escalation.
That seems to be the thinking in some circles, yes.
Makes sense. But look, not everyone shares this optimism, especially about a quick summit.
No, definitely not.
There are warnings, right? Some view this potential meeting very differently.
That's true. There's reporting that some see it as a significant victory for Russian President Putin after weeks of U.S. President Trump's verbal attacks.
And the concern is?
The concern, among skeptics, is that Russian President Putin might leverage a personal meeting, try to persuade the U.S. to pressure Ukrainian President Zelensky into serious concessions.
Potentially bypassing agreements worked out at lower levels.
Exactly. High-level meetings usually finalize things already agreed upon by officials, but U.S. President Trump appears confident in his ability to, make deals directly.
And there are warnings about the practicalities, too, the organization of it all.
Yes, there's talk of underwater rocks, hidden difficulties that could derail the whole thing, especially in such a tight schedule.
So analysts are cautioning against unrealistic expectations.
Very much so. People like Samuel Charp from RAND, for example, warn that a summit this fast creates unrealistic hopes.
Saying it could maybe start a process but not secure an actual agreement.
Precisely. And that even if a summit happens, a long-term ceasefire would be exceptionally difficult given the deep-seated issues involved.
And there's skepticism from other corners, too. I saw mentions of displeasure about the obvious achievements of the peace process. Sounds a bit sarcastic.
Well, yes, some commentary highlights that U.S. President Trump hasn't revealed specifics about any potential deal.
Right.
And analysts are generally wary of drawing big conclusions from his comments alone. Past statements about Russian President Putin's readiness for talks haven't always led to substantial progress.
And it's pointed out that Russian President Putin hasn't really shown signs of making concessions or changing Russia's military objectives on the ground.
That's a key point. There's also speculation, even from some Ukrainian observers, that Russian President Putin might agree to meet just to avoid further escalation, sort of keep a door open for talks.
Without actually conceding anything.
Yeah.
Or looking weak by accepting an ultimatum.
That's the interpretation, yes. It highlights this fundamental clash of expectations. U.S. President Trump wants a quick gift, de-escalation.
While the other side's objectives seem largely unchanged.
Right. And despite the diplomatic activity, like U.S. President Trump's special envoy visiting Moscow, recently described as a good meeting by an official, the White House still intends to keep up the pressure.
More sanctions expected this week.
That's what's being reported.
Yeah.
So it's this dual approach, diplomacy and pressure, happening at the same time.
Okay, so amidst all this, let's get back to the specifics. This air truce idea keeps coming up. What does that actually involve?
It's a key proposal circulating, yes. Essentially, it's a suggested suspension of drone and missile strikes.
Just drones and missiles.
That seems to be the focus of this particular idea, but critically, it's contingent on Ukraine also signing on. It has to be mutual.
So it's not a full ceasefire?
No, definitely not. It's a very specific, limited form of de-escalation being discussed.
And what is Russia's stance on a broader ceasefire, beyond just this air truce?
Well, reports indicate Russian President Putin isn't prepared for a complete ceasefire right now.
Because his troops are seen to be advancing.
That's the assessment, yes. Troops advancing steadily, and Moscow's stated military objectives remain unchanged, at least publicly.
So there's uncertainty if even a limited truce, like the air truce, would have acceptable terms for Kyiv.
Exactly. Would it include demands that Ukraine and its allies just couldn't accept? That's a major question.
Especially when Russia's core demands seem pretty fixed.
They do. The stated conditions for ending the conflict haven't shifted much. Demands like Ukraine declaring neutral status.
And recognizing the incorporation of Crimea and the 4 other regions into Russia.
Right. Which are, non-starters for Kyiv.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Ukraine's response. They categorically disagree with those demands.
Mm-hmm.
And they're calling for Russia to cease fire first to create conditions for actual peace talks.
And Ukrainian President Zelensky recently had that phone call with U.S. President Trump, described as productive.
Yeah, they discussed sanctions, Russian strikes on cities. Zelensky specifically mentioned on social media that U.S. President Trump was fully informed about the ongoing strike.
Highlighting the reality on the ground, even as these diplomatic efforts ramp up.
It's a complex web. And other players are involved too, right? Like Belarus.
Yes, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko apparently raised the air truce question with Russian President Putin, too.
Implying Russia might be interested if Zelensky agrees to halt flying apparatuses.
That was the reported phrasing, yes. This happened during a meeting between them.
And didn't Lukashenko also meet with U.S. President Trump's envoy recently?
He did, Keith Kellogg, back in June. That was quite significant, the highest-ranking American official to visit Belarus since 2020. And Kellogg is expected in Kyiv this week, too.
So lots of moving parts, lots of conversations happening.
Multifaceted diplomatic engagement, for sure.
But, okay, this air truce idea, we need to remember the history here. There have been truces before, and they haven't always held.
That's a really vital piece of context, absolutely.
Russian President Putin reportedly ignored calls for a longer, 30-day ceasefire before.
That's correct, though he did declare that 72-hour truce back in May for the WWII anniversary.
Right. And wasn't there also a moratorium on strikes against energy infrastructure mediated by U.S. President Trump back in March?
There was a 30-day one, but it was subsequently violated.
And each side blamed the other for breaking it first.
Yes, that's usually how it goes. This history just underscores how difficult it is, not just to get an agreement, but to actually implement and maintain it.
Especially when the fundamental goals are still so far apart.
Exactly.
It paints a challenging picture. What about public sentiment inside Russia? Do we know how ordinary citizens feel about this?
Well, there are some insights, and they're quite illuminating, maybe even a bit surprising.
Oh.
Survey data from the Levada Center, which is an independent research group, suggests that about 2/3 of Russians actually support ending hostilities at the current stage.
2/3, really?
Yeah.
As opposed to continuing.
Yes, while about a quarter support continuing them. The director of the center suggested that most Russians dream of ending the conflict, but crucially, not returning to previous borders.
Ah, okay. So an end to fighting, but maybe not a return to the pre-conflict status quo.
That seems to be the nuance. It highlights a domestic dynamic within Russia that Russian President Putin likely has to consider.
Interesting. So looking ahead then, potential next steps. U.S. President Trump has told European leaders about his plan to meet Putin.
Yes, he's informed leaders like the UK's Sir Keir Starmer, Germany's Friedrich Merz, and Mark Rutte in the Netherlands.
Mentioning his intention for this first in-person meeting since 2018.
Right. And he apparently also mentioned that this initial meeting might be followed by a summit involving both Russian President Putin and Ukrainian President Zelensky.
A three-way summit. Or separate talks.
The format wasn't specified, apparently. Could be separate, could be joint. It's still unclear.
But that potential follow-up is key.
Right.
Though, I imagine there's caution there, too.
Oh, definitely. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, known to be close to U.S. President Trump, called for restraint and consistency.
Acknowledging the day's news was positive, but
saying, we still have a lot of work ahead. He sees a trilateral meeting as maybe the most promising path eventually, but emphasizes there are a number of obstacles to overcome first.
obstacles to make such a meeting actually productive and useful.
Exactly. He rightly cautioned against expecting some immediate grand breakthrough.
So summing this all up, this swift diplomatic activity, it really seems spurred by that looming deadline, the U.S. ultimatum.
It appears that way, yes.
And U.S. President Trump himself isn't revealing much detail, openly saying, I have been disappointed in the past.
Clearly referencing previous attempts that didn't work out.
So the fundamental challenge remains bridging these massive gaps between the parties, especially over what truce or peace even means to each side.
Particularly when one side, Russia, continues to show few signs of making major concessions or altering its military goals.
Right. So this whirlwind of diplomacy, it offers a glimmer of hope, maybe, but it's unfolding against this backdrop of really entrenched positions and, let's face it, a history of broken agreements.
Which leaves us with the big question. Can this urgency alone overcome such profound disagreements? Or is this just, another chapter in a long, difficult struggle?
A lot to watch in the coming days and weeks. Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We are here to make things clear. New episodes every day.